Hey y'all, welcome back to What's in a Name. I'm Josh Kasoff. Thanks for joining us tonight. For episode 4, I want to cover something that's near and dear to my heart, the stories of refugees and immigrants. Myself being the product of refugees and immigrants, I really like to highlight their stories in my journalistic work, and especially when it comes to cannabis as well. Our featured strains tonight will be Bushido OG and Katana OG of Fleur here in town. Beautiful, beautiful strains. They let us take 2 different tours of their facilities, actually, each with amazing shots and glorious footage of both the Bushido and Katana strains, as well as their many other strains. As for the story of Bushido, it's in regards to a man named Naing, a Burmese refugee who came to America and really made this country his home in so many fantastical and magnificent ways. He was an absolutely exceptional man. So, without further ado, I hope you enjoy episode 4 of What's in a Name. Entirely an original of Las Vegas-based cultivators Fleur, the strains Bushido OG and Katana OG have quite the story behind them. One that involves samurais, cannabis mentorship, swords, the remarkable life of a Burmese refugee, and a strain called Wookiees and Cream. With the names of Bushido and Katana, one would naturally assume the stories behind the strain names involve East Asia, and you'd be correct, multiple countries from that region of the world, in fact. The name Bushido comes from the name for the moral code and rules of behaviors of samurais, the famous super soldiers that have become synonymous with Japan for centuries. The legendary warriors were featured in all kinds of movies, some of which strangely included the very not Japanese actor Tom Cruise. Samurais live their lives by a code of moral principles. Of those principles are the values of justice, courage, compassion, respect, integrity, honor, loyalty, and self-control. The last trait being the trait I have the least of whenever I'm at Whataburger. As a way to live one's life, Bushido is certainly a noble philosophy to live by, as it incorporates many parts of almost anyone's life, regardless of their walk of life. It's inspirational, advice-filled, and has values that could lead to a more productive and happier existence. As for Katana, anyone familiar with samurai culture should instantly be familiar with this name. It's the famous thin and curved yet incredibly deadly two-handed sword used by samurais for centuries and by Michonne to decapitate multiple walkers throughout many seasons of The Walking Dead. The trusted blade of samurai warriors and a weapon known for its usefulness, it's become the weapon synonymous with anything samurai or even ninja related sometimes. Since 2016, Sven Bloom has been working in the cannabis industry, from first cultivating for the apothecary shop before eventually ending up with Fleur, the well-known growers of such popular strains across the Las Vegas Valley, such as Cherry Chem, Orange Cookies, and Grape Monster. For 3 years, Sven has served as cultivation manager. Under his watch, Fleur strains have blossomed and become breathtaking.
You're breathtaking! You're all breathtaking!
Their strains have even become award-winning. Miss Africa won the 2019 Jack Herrera Cup, and Fleur flowers have been given shoutouts and incorporations across the valley.
I've done several breeding projects at Fleur. It started with Wookiees and Cream. From those seeds, I did a 40 female pheno hunt of the Wookiees and Cream and found a winner out of that. From that same seed pack, I gifted my grow mentor some Wookiees and Cream. He took it up to Oregon, river grown cannabis, and they did a pheno hunt. They found themselves a few female winners and also took a male from that Wookiees and Cream and bred it to their Lemon OG. From that breeding project, they gifted me back the seeds, which is essentially the Wookiees and Cream crossed to the Lemon OG.
Around the time the strains that would become Bushido and Katana cemented their lineage, Sven suffered an unfortunate tragedy, a loss of a friend and cultivation partner whose legacy would go on to become immortal in those very strain names. When it comes to the notable people that cannabis strains are named in honor of, few have as impactful of a story and one that shows the true strength of immigrants, quite like Naing. The second half of the 20th century was an incredibly tumultuous time for all of Southeast Asia. In the 1980s, turmoil began to brew in Burma, more currently known as Myanmar. A growing series of protests, marches, and riots began occurring in the months leading up to August of 1988, which reached a peak on August 8, known as the 8888 uprising due to the date. It was a series of pro-democracy protests organized by students at the colleges in the city of Rangoon, now called Yangon, capital of Myanmar. In opposition of General Ne Win's totalitarian Burma Socialist Program Party, which seized power in a 1962 coup, the nationwide protests saw millions marching across Burma in favor of democracy. Many of these demonstrations, which spanned across Burma's cities and countryside, partially thanks to broadcasting messages from BBC Burma's radio station, spilled over into oppressive violence committed by the socialist Burmese government's military wing, known as the State Law and Order Restoration Council. While the Burmese government only acknowledges 350 deaths related to the military-led massacres, most estimates say the number of casualties caused by the SLORC to be somewhere between 3,000 to 10,000 Burmese citizens in the aftermath of the '88 uprising. At only 22 years old at the time, Win Yang likely organized some of these protests.
And Win was there in the streets with Aung San Suu Kyi when the military turned on the democratic protesters and started to shoot them and put them in jail. So he was there with the great lady, at the critical event, and was quite a young man at that time.
It's unknown exactly how many people Win personally knew who were killed by their own government simply for protesting one-party totalitarianism, but the number is likely quite a few.
It wasn't safe for him to stay in the city any longer. Going into jail there for protesting against the military was pretty much a death sentence for you. So like a lot of young men that were able, he went into the jungle. According to what he shared with me, and I have reason to believe it's all true, he joined a kind of a volunteer militia. He did get shot at, shooting and getting shot at. Some of his friends did die there in the jungle before he ever came to Bangkok where we met.
How long was he in the jungle for?
So I guess from 88 until around early 1990, I'd say about a year or at least a year and a half.
In fact, Win's life only became more dangerous after the attempted uprising. Seeing the brutality of the Burmese government with his own eyes, Win quickly became a refugee in nearby Thailand. While at the Thailand Baptist Student Center in 1990, Win met and quickly befriended Liam Madden.
One of the things that was funny is we discovered we had a lot of correspondences with one another. He was 6 feet tall, I was 6 feet tall. I weighed 131 pounds, he was 131 pounds. He was born in April, I was born in April. He was left-handed, I was left-handed. He would come over to my apartment and start to play guitar. I loved his guitar playing. He could play Beatles songs extremely well.
That December while visiting, Liam's mother Mary Munell and sister Leandra were introduced to and were quickly captivated by Win's story of simultaneous survival and loss.
While we were there, my brother said to my mom, he said, he introduced us to Win, and he said, mother him a little bit because he can't see his family. He can't see his own mother because he couldn't go back to Burma. And so he pretty much went everywhere we went while we were in Bangkok.
With the influx of Burmese refugees, Thailand's policy on refugees soon changed. Win was frequently targeted and arrested on several occasions by Thai law enforcement.
When he went into the IDC, that's Immigration Detention Center, it turned out to be about 100 days that he was in there.
When they returned to Georgia, Liam's family worked with their senators to get Win into America, where he'd be safe from the turmoil ensuing across Southeast Asia at the time. Mary, who would eventually become a second mother to Win, was particularly horrified by the atrocities that occurred only a decade earlier during the Cambodian genocide of the 1970s.
I got our senators, the two senators for our state. They contacted the office in Washington that was in charge, and it just happened the day they called, his file was on their desk. So they were immediately able to get things working. And so I think it was just meant for him to come. I think it was meant for him to be here.
In 1991, Win finally arrived on American soil. As expected, with living anywhere drastically different from where you grew up, the first few years were always an adjustment for Win Yang.
I think Win probably had some PTSD going on, and all of his wild experiences that he had just surviving and being in jail and everything, I think he was still reprocessing that, and there was some depression at times.
But with the gracious help of the Madden family, consisting of everything from enrolling him in ESL programs at the University of Georgia, to watching The Godfather, to even going to an Atlanta Braves game, he became both familiar with and very appreciative of America and American culture. Throughout his years in the South, Win truly shined, showing how multi-talented he was across many different activities. Win became employed as a hibachi chef at the local Kyoto Japanese restaurant and became so loved as a chef at the Athens, Georgia location, they transferred him to their location in Hilton Head, South Carolina.
They liked him so well that they encouraged him to stay. And so he ended up buying a condo and living down there for a number of years. And he was so popular that his photograph, his picture was on the billboard leading into town.
They called him the mayor of Hilton Head. I mean, he was so popular, he knew everybody on the island.
When some friends he made in Hilton Head decided to relocate to Las Vegas, Win followed just a few of the countless number of friends he made and moved west. If there was ever an example of a man who's maybe done everything, Win Yang did that. He did everything from selling timeshares for Marriott to becoming a personal trainer, and even worked in Alaska for a time period. Apart from work, Win was incredibly talented in many different arts. His oil paintings are beautiful enough to be viewed at the Museum of Modern Art. And he had another advantage during his days as a chef, as Leandra remembers him being an excellent chef who frequently cooked Burmese cuisine for the Madden family.
He would make these amazing Burmese meals, I mean, with multiple dishes for us when he was living with us in Elberton. And there was a dish that I called Burmese chili. I don't know exactly what it was, but it was like meat and beans, and it was so delicious. It was been 25 years ago, and I still think about that dish.
Beyond simply cannabis cultivation, Win had quite the green thumb for all vegetables as well. In 2016, Win finally received the honor that he had long desired since first immigrating in 1991. On a September afternoon at the Lloyd D. George Courthouse, Win Naing officially became an American citizen. Along with many other immigrants from across the world, Win was officially naturalized. Throughout his time in America, Win was never ashamed of his patriotism. In his living room in California, and many times throughout his life, he proudly donned the American flag and made sure to always be thankful to America. During his time in Vegas, he worked with Sven Bloom at the apothecary shop. Throughout the year, Sven would give Win a ride to work almost every day. During that time, they became close and even stayed friends when Win moved to North California. While there, you can see the size of the cannabis plants he grew. His green thumb skills were certainly on display in the process. Despite the horrifying tragedy that brought him to America, Win lived a life of absolute wonder. Tragically though, despite how full of life he always was, Win Yang sadly passed away during one of the many out-of-control wildfires that hit near Chico, California in 2020. As sad as his passing was, Mary, Leandra, Liam, and the endless amount of people who were positively impacted by Win and his story want to remember Win for the values he stood for, many of which were incorporated into the Bushido philosophy as well.
That was the thing about Win. He was a philosopher. He had a lot of ideas about how you should live and how to live the good life and what constitutes a good life. And he would share that with you all the time.
And especially going through all the crazy things, that he was the best friend that I ever had. And I think he would have probably said the same thing about me. And he used to thank me for the things that I did. But I know that if our situation had been reversed, he would have done exactly the same things for me. I really admire the adventurous spirit. He's a very, very generous person. Even when he was a refugee, he would always be giving something.
Wanting to remember and immortalize his friend at the same time, Sven soon took the opportunity to name 2 new Fleur strains after Win. Because Win was truly such a follower of the Bushido philosophy and samurai culture, Sven knew exactly what to name the 2 new Fleur strains after. The first one being Bushido OG, and the second being Katana OG, Bushido's sister named after the samurai's trusty and deadly sword. Since our first interview, Bushido and Katana have hit a number of Vegas dispensaries, and Sven has heard nothing but stellar reviews on the flower. A recent post about Bushido on the Vegas Trees subreddit shows many happy consumers. A certificate of analysis shows the strain is testing off the charts as well, with THC breaking almost 30% and a good amount of pinene to stay active with. It's the perfect sativa to honor a fascinating man who was so active in so many different pursuits throughout his life. In fact, some of the batches have even broken 30% THC. So Win is surely resting easy knowing an already popular strain is directly inspired by his endlessly optimistic spirit.
Every time someone smoked the Bushido or the Katana, they were, putting one in the air for him and kind of paying respect to him. So to me, I looked at it as the ultimate form of paying respect and paying homage to a fellow grower.
About 18 months before his passing, a chat with Sven showed that despite surviving an uprising in Burma and a detention jail in Thailand, Win always had a bit of an American heart.
And this was unfortunately one of our last interactions was read Bible, pray God, grow cannabis, obey the American Constitution, I vote, I fight, I shoot guns.
So I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in tonight. It really meant to be able to put life to Win's story, more life than it already had, obviously, and really document it and show why his memory is really living on through the Bushido and Katana strains. And I usually like to end every episode with, something witty or something funny, but I want to do something a little different. First, I wanted to thank everyone in the Madden family. Leandra, Mary, Liam as well. They really provided so many more fantastic stories and understanding into Win's character and what he really stood for. And as for the end of the show, I want to give Win the floor. Through speaking with Mary, they luckily sent me some videos of Win. So I wanted to end tonight's video with some wisdom from the man himself.
I like to be success, I like the feeling of that success. So I got to keep going. And that feeling of success is better than sex, better than food, better than sleeping, better than anything. And I just feeling it every day. And I love you, mother. You take care.